let's play out these pictures from you. And these pictures are coming out from Agra. And this is one reason why there are many who are arguing that a complete, total lockdown cannot sustain in India any longer. These are pictures from Agra today, where you see a poor man who is taking milk that's been spilled out onto the streets, along with a pack of dogs who are licking that milk as well. That's how desperate the situation has come. Look at that poor man who's picking up that milk with his hands and putting it into that jar. And you have those dogs over there who are also licking that milk, this milk spilling out onto the roads. And this is perhaps one of the most heartbreaking, telling pictures that you will see about the impact of this lockdown and whether it was poorly planned to begin with. Even though it was much needed, the question that is being asked is whether it needed better planning, and that as we go ahead into what very much looks like an extended lockdown for another 2 weeks, whether the government is doing enough to help people like this man you see on your screens there. Yogendra Yadav and Vivek Reddy joining us this evening. Anjali Bhardwaj will also be joining us in just a little while. Yogendra Yadav, how bad is it? I mean, you know, we are looking at a possible extension of this lockdown, Yogendra Yadav, but do you think that the government in these 3 weeks has been able to perhaps work on a different strategy or something to help India's poor?
These pictures make you wish to hang your head in shame, Nidhi. Frankly, we are witnessing one of the biggest tragedies unfolding in front of our eyes. A tragedy which could have been at least in part anticipated, a tragedy that could have been responded in a somewhat better way, a tragedy that can still be prevented in some ways even now when the Prime Minister is to announce something big tomorrow. So let's forget the past. Let's try and say what can be done now. Please remember, we're looking at least 3 or 4 categories of labor here. One are those who had started marching from their home, who are stuck somewhere. The government tells the Supreme Court that at least 6 lakhs of them, could be more. Then there are millions like the one Srinivas just interviewed. They are out on some site working there. They are visible and be traced. Then there's a third category of those who live in some kind of a home. It could be a rented room where some of them stay, who are being hounded by their landlords, who are being pushed out for not being paid money. And then, of course, there are labor who stay and belong to the place, who are not migrants, but who are without jobs. We are witnessing one of the biggest tragedies. To my mind, the least that the government can do, while the government has done some very sensible things for the rural population in terms of PDS and so on. But remember, as we witnessed in this particular case, the benefits of ration do not reach these people because their ration card is back home. The ration card doesn't work here. And one of the things that we have been requesting, demanding for the last 10 days is please give universal ration. Anyone who presents himself or herself to any ration shop should be given ration, even if they do not have a ration card. This is in a country where our stock of food grain is overflowing right now. This is the least the country can do. And frankly, I also think that if the lockdown is to be accepted by whichever name, I think Indian Railways are competent enough to run special trains to take these people. Someone might say social distancing, but did you see any social distancing in these videos, in these photographs? There is no social distancing right now there. And taking them in one secluded train from point to point will not make it any worse. This will just give them the comfort of being back home, which is so critical. And as that boy from Bihar asked, if people can be brought from other countries in aeroplanes, can't be sent to their villages. Absolutely. And if the government cannot, for whatever reason, decide not to send them, then the least they deserve is an allowance, a cash allowance to be paid to them, which would cover their food and other needs. Remember, these are people we have held against their wish. This is almost like a prison. And when you keep people in prison, you give them food.
Right, right. You know, Yogendra Yadav, you've made some very important points there. And I think, Vivek Reddy, the point is that this is a very difficult decision for the government. It's not easy. The lockdown had to be done. But I guess the question is that could it have been planned better so that migrant laborers were able to at least go back? Arrangements could have been made for them, even if they had 2 days notice or some notice. You know, Singapore announced a lockdown with 4 days notice. My question, Vivek Reddy, though, is to look ahead. And do you expect that more measures can be announced in the immediate future, that along with this extension of the lockdown, we hope that something more is announced for these poor people who are having to now drink milk off the street, off the road?
Yes, certainly the government will be alive to these problems, Nidhi. This is number one. Second is, we have to understand, Yogendra Yadav pointed that out also, that there is a 80 crore PDS scheme with a coverage of 80 crore people, which is quite huge, which is massive, and one of the biggest in the world. This is number one. Second is, those who have slipped out of this are being covered under the Jan Dhan account of 20 crore ladies, 20 crore women. I think the government has thought through the process and initiated some very innovative schemes. Now, those that slip out of this also, the government has issued orders that deputy commissioners must open community kitchens and ensure that nobody must starve, and hunger must be taken care as a first priority. Now, beyond this also, the government will be looking at measures tomorrow, because as it is, what the government has done has been a huge effort. Now, what will be done will be seen tomorrow. Definitely, the government will be very sensitive to all these things.
I agree that it's a huge task, Vivek Reddy, and you know, I'm glad that there is no sort of political finger pointing at this time, because let's try to collectively look for solutions together. It's not easy to impose a lockdown like this. And Yogendra Yadav, if you had to identify the most immediate and pressing thing that you hope can be done now, in terms of, for instance, setting up kitchens to feed people, that is something that really involves the state administrations, local administrations. It's a whole, you know, a chain of command. Is that the first and most important priority, getting food to them before you actually even move them?
Yes, specifically number one, order under National Food Security Act that midday meal scheme employees and the midday meal site, which is the local school, shall be open for anyone who wants to eat, something like 100 meals a day. Remember, these are schools where 400 to 500 children are being fed every day. So the entire machine is in place. You do not order the DMs to do that unless you pass an order of the central government to say midday meal scheme funds can be used for this purpose. That order has not come as yet. Number two, order under the National Food Security Act to say anyone who presents himself or herself at the ration shop can be given the ration which is due, which is about 10 kgs of food grain. All they need is, even if they don't have ration card, if they can produce any Aadhaar card, or if they produce a signature from Sarpanch or Panch of that area to say, yes, this person lives here, that's all they need, they should be given ration. That order we have been demanding for the last 10 days. The order has not come. I'm really hoping the Prime Minister will announce it tomorrow. And Mr. Reddy is correct to say 80 crores are being covered. That's been the case for the last 12 years, Mr. Reddy. The problem is that there are additional 10-15 crores who need it as much as these 80 crores do, but who do not get it. And today our focus should be, if we want to ensure that a country like India, which wants to be global power for the 21st century, if we have hunger deaths in this country, nothing can be more shameful than that.
Absolutely.
Then we should be focusing on that 10 or 15 crores. And that, Mr. Reddy, they are not covered by Jan Dhan. No, that's incorrect information. There is no evidence to say that those who have Jan Dhan accounts are the ones who are not covered by ration.
But you know what you said very importantly, Mr. Yadav, was the need for
that's not what I'm saying.
That the centre has powers to invoke the law in order to make state governments comply and ensure that food does reach those who need it. Anjali Bhardwaj also joining us. She's a social activist working on the ground with India's poorest. And Anjali, you know, just from your sense on the ground, how bad is it? And what would you want to hear from the Prime Minister for India's poor tomorrow?
Well, Nidhi, things are very, very grave. I think that there are no two ways about it, that the poor, in order to be able to survive this lockdown, need a great deal of attention and help from the governments, both the central and the state governments, wherever they are. It's very critical that going forward, especially now that the lockdown is being extended, it is important to take into account the kind of hardships that we have already seen on the ground, and we have to understand that these are only going to multiply. The reason is that we know that 90% of India's workforce is in the unorganized sector. People have lost all employment opportunities in the lockdown. Any savings that they might have had are over. So where are they going to get their meals from, their food from? Even people who have somehow managed in the last few weeks without an income will find themselves not being able to manage going forward to procure their meals, to procure medicines, to procure basic things that they need to lead a life of dignity. What we need tomorrow for the Prime Minister to say to people, reassure them and implement are measures, clear measures that will get food across to people so children don't have to die of hunger and starvation, people don't get desperate. We need to see some wage support coming. Just look at the international figures. India is committing, even when we say that there is an economic package, it is really a very, very small percentage of our GDP. It's just a little over 1%. But if you look at countries across the world, people are getting wage support. You look at Germany, you look at England, you look at any other country which is dealing with this crisis, because there is a recognition that people need money to be able to make their lead a life of dignity.
Absolutely. I think the concern, Vivek Reddy, also is that, you had we've already seen pictures from various parts of the country that, of some unrest also, whether it was from Surat, whether, you see these heartbreaking pictures of the man drinking milk from the street, but, agitated people, people are getting agitated and they will get agitated. You had an incident in Delhi over the weekend also. So that's why, Vivek Reddy, the plea is that please can the government ensure that there is something that is actually announced that is substantive for India's poor, or we could really be heading into some very difficult territory.
Yes, one clarification to what Yogendra Yadav said, and from the perspective of what you are saying, Nidhi. Many of the states in India, at least Delhi and Karnataka, which I can say, have universalized the food ration system. And they have said whoever presents himself will be given. Now let us see, remember that this is a very transient situation. It is to get over these transitory situation that these measures are being brought. The government said we will double the allocation of food grains for 80 crore people across the board. This is number one. The second is regarding the Jan Dhan scheme that I was saying. It was 500 rupees that was to be deposited to 20 crore women to use it for some expenses of theirs.
But 500
Look at the
rupees
wide
is
and vast
nothing.
coverage. I know it is nothing. For a beginning, the government has started with that. So therefore, look at the vast, universalization of the scheme. 20 crore people means 20 crore families. 20 crore women means. And money at the hands of women is better used, for qualitative purposes of immediate needs of the family.
Sure, but they need
so this
more
is
money.
How the government.
They need much more money.
Yes.
I think Anjali wants to come in on that before I wrap up. Anjali.
Yes. Look, this is not correct. Let me just state the facts. There is no universalization of rations that has happened in Delhi or other states. It's only in a very few states in the south of India, including Kerala.
I'm sorry, Anjali.
We are still talking about needy people getting rations, is what the governments are saying, which means that people are still being left out. The central government also has announced that people will get extra rations, but only those who have ration cards. Look, we have 80 million tons of food grains in our food stocks in the FCI. The government must announce tomorrow that everybody who needs ration will get it. What are we saving up those
Many
stocks
of the
for?
states are covered.
Anjali,
Please remove your covered.
Please let me finish.
Remove your
We
covered
have
glasses.
a situation. There is a crisis.
understand.
We
Please,
have had
let's not
in
fight.
Uttar Pradesh.
I just said in the beginning, it was good to see
take up
some
these
kind of
schemes. Money has
constructive
been
criticism
allocated under the
and
National
coming
Disaster
together.
Relief Scheme.
Okay, all right. Let's revisit
understand.
this tomorrow night after the Prime Minister's address,
Money
because
has
we
been
will be looking
allotted
out for
under
this,
the
Mr.
NDRF
Reddy.
scheme
I
for
think
states to
everybody
take it
will
up.
be. We will be looking out to see what the government, whether there'll actually be a real plan, a real roadmap for India's poor, because you know it's easy for all of us to be in our homes here in Delhi, wherever, in Bangalore. It's India's poor that are bearing the brunt of this lockdown, and for them, social distancing and everything else will go out of the
biggest
window.
package of
As they say,
1.7
hunger
lakh
will
crore
kill
has
us
been
before the
covered
virus does. So
for
this is
our
very
poor.
important what the government does for them. Thank you very much.